Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Distribution First. On this week's episode, doing something cool, a little special. We're doing a behind the scenes kind of coaching session. Today I'm chatting with Matt Miner and really excited just to dive into what we have going on. So Matt, why don't we just start? You just kind of spill the beans here a little bit. What do you have going on? What are you looking for help with? How can we get started?
Yeah, awesome. Let's get right into it. I love it. Yeah, so currently I am heading up demand at a more of like technical developer tool company called Directus. This is my first foray into doing marketing for technical teams. And what I found is that it is marketing and sales on hard mode because they hate being marketed and sold to. So what our big bet this year really is a big focus on just kind of human content. And I think with the rise of like programmatic SEO and AI generated trash out there, I think there's a big emphasis on creating, just really good content. I think this is a little out of your, typically what you talk about, which is kind of reusing content. I'm a big fan of yours, by the way. I have been for a while. I think I was one of the first people to buy your course back in the day. But this is the first problem I've had where we've got too much content and we're having trouble figuring out how to effectively distribute it, I guess. And yeah, that's really the crux of the problem. And I'd love to talk a little bit today about, some tips on how to best distribute it and get it out there.
Yeah, that's a perfect starting point. I think my biggest question for you to start is sort of like, what are those pieces of content? You have too much. So what are you currently creating? Is it blogs? Are you doing what are you creating for your team?
Yeah. So we've got obviously the standard like directus.io/blog. That's really our main pillar for SEO. So we're using that just to, one of the problems we've had is we've never really ranked for SEO. We had some technical problems with the website before. So we redid the website, started doing more SEO focused content. So really happy with how that's turning out. At the same time, we have documentation as a developer tool. It's like table stakes to have that. In that documentation, it's docs.directus.io. We have user guides and a little more product focused, quick tips, tricks, things to do, like how to send Vonage text messages with our platform, things like that. And then we've spun up a owned media channel called directus.io/TV. So we're doing video and our head of DevRel is really owning that. And he's created he's incredible. And we have TV shows coming out every single day, it seems like. So yeah, all this content. We've got, kind of higher level stuff. We've got stuff in the weeds, and then we've got more entertainment type stuff. So a big swath.
So you said the SEO is hitting. So that's sort of the next thing that I would think about is like what's currently working. So the SEO seems to be hitting. And then for the more entertainment side are you seeing traction on that, or is it still too new to know whether or not that's actually
Yeah, no, great question. On the SEO stuff, we are finally starting to rank for non-branded keywords, which is a huge win for us. We have incredible branch, we get 3,000 hits a month just for people searching our company name because we're open source, and that's been a really big marketing lever for us. But at the same time, unless you know us, you're not going to find us. So big win just to start ranking for kind of use case oriented keywords and things people are thinking for or searching for that. In terms of the more entertainment type of content, we just launched our TV channel, I guess, and it was the week before Christmas. So we're letting that grow a little bit. We have a subscription for that too. We have about 80 people that have subscribed to it. So, just growing gradually with that.
And do you have any distributions set up for that right now?
Yeah, sort of. So we work with a really good video editor who helps us kind of put all that stuff together. Part of that ask is that we have like video trailers so they cut out, like 90-second snippets, and we're using that primarily for social promotion and putting out the TV stuff.
Okay. So that would be one thing maybe we could work through a little bit that I would really suggest doing, is because I see this a lot even with the clients that I work with one-on-one, is just getting the clips is one thing, but it's like having that plan built up to be able to, like, once you get the clips, or once this thing releases, we know what's coming next, like building a launch plan or building out some momentum around this thing. So for you, I think that's maybe something to hone in on is, do you know what those clips are beforehand, or is that really like, up to them to decide?
Yeah, so we kind of let the video editor handle that, basically pull out like any parts that stood out. Like, I think we go more for like the emotion, like action type stuff. So if somebody's laughing or anything that's happening, like that's primarily what they look for when they're pulling those clips. And then we just redirect traffic back to our website. So that's, we don't really know what we're getting, but it's more quality, I think. And we try to leave out kind of the boring snippets. If that
and
makes sense.
Where are you posting these at?
So these are just like LinkedIn and I keep saying Twitter. It's our X, our X account.
Okay. So do you have a set number that you're getting every time? Like, hey, get us between 2 and 5, get us, 6.
Yeah. So we have shows that are, it might be easier if I just show you kind of our schedule. Would that help to show you just like
for
the
sure.
content schedule? Okay. Just so you get an idea for like the output, that it's insane. Let me see if I can share here. Here we go. Can you see that? I have a fairly
I can.
large screen.
So anybody listening, we're looking at a Notion calendar.
Yeah, I forgot. You're losing out if you're listening.
That's right.
I'll do my best to describe it. No, so we're looking at a content calendar right now for January, and this is like in our marketing HQ in Notion. So what we have here is all of the things that are being launched per day. So each show typically has like a little video thing. We have content that comes out. As you can see, there's like 2 to 3 things that we launch any given day. So the distribution of that is what we're kind of having trouble with. Now, to get back to your original question about the trailers that we're doing, it depends on the content. So we have a couple of different types of shows. We have more of the entertainment kind of fun stuff, like how are developers using AI, like podcast type thing. And then we also have some thought leadership stuff where our CEO is doing like a roundtable discussion on like a big major topic. For the roundtable discussion, thought leadership stuff, we try to get 4 to 5 clips per of like just like the short little quick fun snippets. And then for the more like entertainment type stuff, we're doing just one trailer that's typically 90 seconds with like some of the big parts. So it depends on the type of content, and there's really no rhyme or reason to it. We're just kind of rolling with it.
So do you guys have that embedded in your plans then? Is it like written down? Is it part of what's going on, or is it just like in your brain?
What's that? The trailers?
Yeah, like hey, for this one, we're getting 90-second trailers. Hey, for this one, we're getting 5 to 6 clips.
Yeah, we're kind of building the plane as we fly it. And it's more of like, let's get X many clips for this. Let's do for this. We're getting into a better process with it being outsourced. But for now, it's just like wheeling and dealing, seeing what happens.
Yeah. I think for you, like looking at this, it really has to do with mapping, and this is the whole thing around my show and all that. The framework is distribution first. It's understanding like what you even need to get out there, and then mapping that out. So in really your clips, all I would think about with those clips, it's just a library of stuff that you now have access to share at any point. So I wouldn't necessarily think about you having this like, I've got 5 clips, how do I share them out over the next 2 weeks? It's really like, let's build a plan around the messages we want to, talk about, the things we want to hit, what are those key points? And then going back to the content library in the hub that you've sort of created and say, all right, now how do I pick and pop these pieces in the right spots? And I wouldn't look too far for that either. Like you could do that a couple weeks, you could do that over the course of a month. So like as a team, understanding like, all right, for February and March, we really want to hit X. Like, what are we creating? Because you've got this stuff coming out 3 times a day, right? Like you've got stuff coming. And so it's how do you then A, understand what's coming off of that? And then B, understand like, all right, so at the end of this 2-week sprint or whatever, we're going to have a mini library of 15, 20, 30 clips, like just having that knowledge and then maybe sorting and organizing those based on the themes or the points of view or the topics, if you just get more generalized of like what those things are about. And then from there, what I would do is actually build out a calendar that maps those just it could be like literally like a printed out calendar where you write it down. It doesn't even have to be a Notion or anything. It absolutely can be a Notion. And actually, if you're doing Notion, you can set it up to where like that just becomes a view almost of like distribution and themes. But like for LinkedIn, we've got 4 themes we talk about consistently. Can you hit those every single week? And then do you have content that can support that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, it's about kind of what you're saying is kind of aligning the channel with kind of the persona you want to go after. So for LinkedIn, for instance, so we work with like developers, we work with non-technical teams, we work with like technical leaders. For LinkedIn, what we found is like, that's really where the technical leaders tend to hang out, like the senior engineers, developers. So what you're saying is kind of align around what each channel, the story you tell. And then that's the base for that content.
1,000%. And being
Nice.
able to look backward at what you've already created that can fill that gap and looking forward and how do you tie distribution into your content roadmap moving forward to say, all right, we can pull from this content that we've already created. And then how do we plan out knowing, all right, we have to hit, this technical leader on LinkedIn. Oh, it just in planning, right? Like you might be like, oh, we don't have anything new for for the end of Q1 for these leaders. Like we need to create something, right?
Yeah.
It just helps you be more forward focused in terms of what you're going to be creating.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually that's kind of a good segue into, I don't know if this is something you want to cover, but thinking about like platforms. And actually one thing I learned from one of your early courses was all about distribution docs and pulling out like for any piece of content, you can get like 5 to 7 different pieces of content for it. So that's been like kind of a process I've put in place, since learning that. And I have a lot of success with it. I think now another kind of piece we struggle with is doing too much and going too broad on too many social networks. We've got like, the CTO really wants to do Mastodon. Our founders created a script years ago on X about we have like 50,000 followers and we get like 2 likes per post. So it's inflated. Not me. I'm not going to take credit for that one. But LinkedIn, we're starting to grow a really good presence because we're putting like kind of focused energy towards that, getting the team more engaged in creating content on their own and kind of becoming a collection of people instead of just a brand. So one question for you is, obviously, the focused approach is best. When it comes to having this many different types of content though, is it best to figure out like a certain number of personas, like 2 to 3, and then identify that as like developers were going to use Reddit and that's it. Engineering leaders were going to use LinkedIn, that's it. And going about it that way, kind of structuring it.
Yeah, I think that's if you're choosing a platform. So one thing I like to do too is like just evaluate your channel. So that might be something you can do as well as like just a basic channel evaluation of like followers, activity, engagement, effort, enjoyment. Like there's a whole I'll send it to you after this, a whole questionnaire I have that you can fill out. And it's just a basic alignment of what types of channels are actually working for us, B, what do we enjoy doing. So in that case, like if the CTO actually does enjoy like doing something on Mastodon or enjoys like doing that, great. She understands the channel, understands what they're doing. Like what's unfair and not great is when it's like, hey, let's tack this on as an extra thing. You figure it out. And how does like that happens too. So like I empathize with that, but that's where it gets hard because the amount of energy it takes to learn a new platform cannot be like undervalued or undersold. Like that takes a lot of work. Like in most cases, months and months of daily grind to figure out, how does YouTube work? What would make YouTube successful? How do I, like, there are experts who spent years doing that. LinkedIn, no different. X, like the people who do this, it's not just like, oh, I can just wake up and post and I'll grow a following, right? Like if I just post once a day, it's going to work. Like we know that's not how it works, but yet that's how we kind of treat platforms and treat channels, is just like, oh, we'll just do that too. And so that, I think some of it's a mental shift, and the bigger the org, the more complex, the harder it is to sometimes manage those shifts, because there is an expectation that we have to be everywhere and really like show up everywhere. Like what if somebody comes and, and it's like, well, what if somebody comes and sees you get one like on everything and nobody interacts with it, so it's like, there's that too. So I think it's balancing those different areas when you're evaluating channels. But then on the flip side, the focus is key for audience. Like for you in particular, if you're finding that different channels have different audiences specifically, that's going to make a massive difference in terms of how and who you're interacting with on those channels. It could actually make it easier in some cases, because, I've worked with different companies where they might have a very tactical, practical, user of the software. And then at the same time, they're marketing to founders or CEOs for, a different maybe part of the company. And it's hard because then you're getting, mixed messages throughout the channel of like, sometimes they're talking to CEOs, sometimes they're talking to, tactical, how to get in the tool and do it. And it's like, it's a hard balance to manage, but that's where potentially like different people on the team could tackle different pieces of that message. Different channels could tackle different pieces of that message. So I would kind of work through that on your end too, potentially, and just see like, all right, the CTO talks about X on Y. I'm going to talk about Z on, the brand page is really going to be focused on this on LinkedIn, and our email newsletter is really focused on, this. And once you have those channels sort of figured out, that's when you can really start to, again, always go back to like reverse engineering the content that's getting created. And that's where like having that integrated into the plan, because I don't know what TV and all the stuff that's getting created, but you want to make sure that what's being created at least has a distribution mode. You've got somewhere where you can put that thing to. And again, probably won't bat 1,000. Nobody does. But if you can at least, hit 80% of the time, we're really nailing like this piece we created has a way for somebody to get to it and see it, you're going to be way ahead of the game versus a lot of times, which is like, look at all this stuff we're creating.
Yeah.
We're signing people up on the newsletter and, but it just gets buried in an archive somewhere. It's just how it works.
Yeah. To your point about the being everywhere. I remember a few years ago, I still have kind of nightmares of this, when the co-founder was like, at a previous startup, was like, hey, my daughter just started using TikTok. Let's get on that. It was like, okay. We're like, cool, let's do it. So yeah, it's just like, it's almost right now, it feels like we're sort of a boxer and like kind of like figuring out the opponent, and like we'll throw a video here, we'll throw a blog here, like kind of jabs, trying to figure it out. But really, we've found no kind of rhyme or reason to it yet. And maybe it's just, it comes with time. But I think you're exactly, dead on, which is like that distribution strategy around each channel is something we hadn't really considered, but makes a ton of sense. Something that actually I had a question on what you were talking about, which was team members kind of owning channels. So there's, with the story I said with the co-founder was like, hey, let's just do TikTok, or CTO was like, hey, let's just do Mastodon. There's kind of an expectation that marketing owns social and just a blanket kind of social strategy. And I think the evolution since having like interns come in and manage social, you can't really do that anymore. Like it's actual viable sales channels now. Do you ever talk to clients or anybody that kind of runs into this problem of like, hey, we've got 2 people in marketing, but it's a 30-person company. Like, does marketing own social, or are they just like the, string pullers behind it and then helping everybody else kind of promote on there and distribute?
I think it's one of the more tricky things that is happening within companies right now. I was having a conversation with somebody about it earlier at the end of last year, because sometimes too, it's like the founder, for instance, would be amazing if they would, but they have no desire to be, on there. And if they would post this instead of the brand, it would, like, or maybe it's like the sales leader who's there, or the customer or the marketer or the head of marketing. It's a really tough balance to figure out who owns what. I think in most cases, yes, the assumption would be marketing owns it, is the string puller, is going to provide me everything I would need. And oh, by the way, I actually don't have time to do any of it. I don't have time to do any of this. I don't know what works. I don't know what doesn't. In your example of a marketing team of whole team of 30, what I might try to do is find those other, like the two marketers, we're going to be in lockstep and we're going to be doing this together, whatever that looks like, right? Like we're going to have this plan defined and we're going to, work in lockstep to distribute this content the best way we know possible. The other way we're going to do that is by finding one or two or three other people on other teams to join us. And so that could be at a small company, maybe it's the head of the sales, maybe it's a really engaged, salesperson, or another person at a company. Like just find that one, you find that one other person to join you. We did this when I was at TechSmith. This was 2020, when LinkedIn was, everybody was locked inside and LinkedIn was really taking off. It was like, how do we get more individuals into it? And there has to be desire. Like I've done every myriad of trainings and, hey, this is how you do it. And this is what a good post looks like. And sometimes it's just reps, but it's also a desire because, what ends up happening, unfortunately, is here's our new post, here's what it's about, or here's our new product release. I mean, we've all seen these. Here's our new product release. And then it's everybody at that company posting the same thing verbatim, maybe with like, I'm so excited in front of it,
Yeah, with AI now. Yeah, AI variations.
with a new little, just a slight tweak. And so I think like finding those people, and then it's just constant communication and collaboration on like being able to pull, I've been talking about this a lot, but being able to pull that like platform native, like that viable stuff out of it to where, this is what's important in this video we just shot, but what's the take that you have on it from your perspective? The sales perspective on this is going to be different just because the person's different, the department's different, all of that, than the marketer, or even like the product marketer might have a completely different perspective than the content marketer, than the VP of marketing. And so it's just trying to figure out like again, like having some forethought of saying like, all right, here's the top things that we pulled out of this content. Let's take, not in a group setting or anything, doesn't have to be, but like, let's just take a half hour here and think through like, all right, I've got to create a post about this for this week. What's the valuable piece that they can come out of this post learning to where they wouldn't have to like click to get that content, and what perspective can I bring to it that isn't just like, hey, we launched it, enjoy.
Yeah. That's more recently than I care to admit, I've had a conversation of like I can't be, that's the thing is like AI and the like ChatGPT and all that stuff, like the one thing it'll never be able to do is have like a subjective view on things, I think. And that's what I've been telling like, the team, like, hey, put your point out there. Like this video that you watched, how do you feel about it? Say it, put it in here. It can be controversial. I mean, that's what, I think that's what makes humans great, is like we all disagree on different things. We have, and that's what I see a lot of like, really, I hate the term thought leaders, but like folks on LinkedIn that are seeing success are doing that too. Like it's a little controversial, that sort of thing. And then I hear back like, well, why don't you just write it for me? I'm like, if I could live inside your head, I would do it. Trust me. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah. And that's tough too. Like that's one of the things where, again, it's like just trying to pick what those things are, because there are, even just in that little snippet of the conversation you just had, it's like, there's like 10 things there that are like potentials, right? Like of like this person trying to do that, or you trying to figure out it, or, oh, just write it for me. Like there's all of these layers to that beyond just a social post, which is funny because it's like, oh, it's just a LinkedIn post.
Yeah, right.
But there's a lot that goes behind it. But I think, yeah, like, so figuring those things out, if it's somebody outside, like I've done this too, like where, like, let's say that person doesn't want to do the writing, but like that's a part of your strategy. Like, let's just say the founder. The founder doesn't want to write, but they're a core part of like the social strategy. They're down to do, like, they're down to post, they're down to have you post or whatever that looks like, but they're just not there. I would suggest batching for that. Like sitting down with them once a month and figuring out, all right, here's the opinions we're trying to get out, or just record it. I've even suggested, and I had some folks do this before who I worked with in the past, like just record a Zoom call and ask them a bunch of questions, because now you have a transcript that you can pull from, and you can utilize things like ChatGPT and other things to just pull out the meat more quickly than, all right, I was in this meeting with him or her, like, what did they say? Or you're like feverishly like taking down notes or other things like that. So being able to have that recording is super helpful, and then batching it. So like understanding like, hey, can we post twice a week on your account? Like that's 8 posts for a month. When you just put it in the context of that, it doesn't feel as daunting, because it could be like, we've got 2 main things we want to talk about this month. We've got this other type of content that goes with it. We need to come up with 8 things that this person can say this month and post. And that's, probably 4x what they're posting right now.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a compounding factor there too. Like you start seeing those leading indicators of likes, comments, things like that. And then they start to understand the value, I guess. So yeah, no, that's a great idea. I know we've been jumping around a lot, but I have another question.
Let's do it.
Unrelated to that. All right. So getting back to the TV thing, right? I don't know if I can promote other folks on here. I don't know if there's like you
can do whatever you want.
We can cut it if we need to. No, but I was having a great conversation with Anthony Kennedy over at Audience Plus, few months.
Friend of the show.
Nice. I love what they're doing.
I'm low-key, not low-key. I'm an advisor for Audience Plus. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Dude, they own media is the future. And that's really the inspiration for our TV channel. Is just, we like to dog food things ourselves, and we built it like on our platform. Otherwise, I totally would have used their platform. Sorry, Anthony. But had a really good conversation about like where video is going, and, with the rise of TikTok and YouTube Shorts and like kind of the short form content. We were stuck in this place of, I had to convince the team that it's okay not to post everything on YouTube. All of the videos that we're doing on our like own media channel. And Anthony had a great point about like, you go to YouTube, you're not going to typically watch like an hour, 2-hour video. Like you're going to watch the highlights or the snippets, the things you want to find. And it sounds like as an advisor to Audience Plus, you probably feel the same way. When it comes to content and sharing it between the own media channel and like the YouTube and the TikTok, is it cross-posting everything, or is it like more of a strategy we should have around how we approach that, I guess?
I would definitely think and cross-posting is a strategy, but you would want a defined strategy that you all feel. I think the tough part, and I do agree, I think own media is the way that, even like in a small way, distribution first is my sliver of owned media, right? Like it's just a podcast, but like it's videos. There's going to be more coming out this year. There's a lot to it that I had forethought when I was building this, believe it or not. And so I think that is the key. The tough part with it is companies are not NBC, ESPN, Disney. It still takes natural effort to get somebody to go to your owned platform and be a subscriber, for like Netflix, great example, like any of these companies, right? Like it's kind of, you have to figure out what your strategy is in a lot of ways from a content perspective of like, there's a bunch of content on these Netflix, Hulu, etc. that I'm never going to watch, and maybe nobody's ever going to watch, I don't know if these are just like, just loss leaders for them. I'm sure if you talk to like, we just need to have content. You've all scrolled something and been like, what is this? Like, somebody's watching this. But somebody's got to create that, in a lot of cases, they're buying that, they're licensing that content, they're doing that. So like, there's opportunities there though to like, and I think that's where it gets exciting, is partnerships with other companies to swap content, finding different mediums to be able to create different types of shows and do that at a different cadence. But as far as like the actual what are you sharing? What do we put on YouTube? What do we not? How do we lead people in? It really all comes back to that strategy. And to me, it's like no different than trying to get somebody on an email list, right? Like at the end of the day, you're trying to get someone off of where they're at, whatever they're doing on the internet, to subscribe to your list, to subscribe to your thing, to then get notified from you about new things that you have coming out. Like that's the goal. The hard part with an owned media channel is that even email, like email, podcasts, etc., I'm in your feed already. Somebody hops on Spotify, I don't even have to alert them that I posted something new. It's there. Boom, new episode dropped today. Email, I can send an email and they don't have to be thinking about Justin at all. They're thinking about like, oh, do I have any bills? Sure. And then there I am. You know what I mean? I'm in their feed. LinkedIn, same thing. So like, that's the tough part about an owned, like a true owned property, is you still have to get somebody to it. So I have to be thinking like, oh, go to Directive site, see if anything's new. So that's where I think with owned media, like that distribution is not going to go away. And you have to have that distribution play around it to say like, again, like pulling, I know Anthony, he talks about this a lot. And I love the example too of like carpool karaoke and things like that, where it's like, you've got these little, like that is a valuable, entertaining piece of content by itself. And it leads to the bigger show. And so it's like, I would think through for you all, as you're creating like this owned property, this media property and different things like that, what are and build the shows or build the segments in that way that makes sense to be like, oh, that's an easy pluck out of it. Like it's, CTO corner or something like that, right? Like I'm just, right. Like you've got the segment that you can pull out and then that becomes a staple that you maybe share out to the larger show.
That's interesting. I think that's kind of a core issue we have right now. Is just like there's no broader theme. Like it is like Netflix. Like we've got stuff that we don't expect people to go in and watch like an hour-long episode of this, but we just have to have it like to make it look like a fully fledged content network sort of thing. But we're missing kind of the overall. What is the next step? What is the goal? How do we get them into the product, introduce them to the product, and that sort of thing? So that's a really good point.
And that could be something too that you think through as you build the library, is then pulling out different topics or themes and repurpose those into other. So like, I mean, there's a whole host. You could completely remix it into like its own episode, to where you take 3 different pieces from 3 different things you've done and you smush them together because they're all about something similar. And you could create a standalone off of that. You could create almost like a playlist. I'm thinking through like how that would form and function, but like essentially creating a playlist, let's say, where maybe it's like how-to topics that you talked about over there. And you can, again, like just take the 5-minute clip of how to do X, how to do Y, how to do Z. And now they're just available for your audience. They don't ever, because that's the thing, like you have to spoon feed people. Like it's like you really do. And like, they're not going to find it. Like I just had this the other day where somebody was talking about like, oh, how do I like repurpose like case studies? And I was like, oh, I have a whole episode where I talked to Joel Cleckley about this. And like, he's just like a genius. Right. And so it's like, here's that episode. And they're like, oh, amazing. I didn't even know this existed. And it was just like a reminder to me that, oh, dang, I should be doing more with that. That's great content to be able to get back out there. And so for me, it's thinking through those things, and that's the balance. And if you have forethought about those segments and how you treat those segments, it might actually limit the amount of new stuff you do have to end up creating, to where, you don't feel the pressure of you and your team drop a new episode every week, because we know out of this one thing, we're going to drop 3 other. We did this with at Metadata with Demand Gen U and with the Demand Event. It was like, we're going to pull out the main 40, and then we're going to pull out 3 5-minute sections out of this, and we're going to drip all of those out. So then you just, you're 3xing your content every single week and it, it looks like there's a lot. It looks like there's new stuff. And it's valuable. It's not just like fluff to put out there. It's like, we framed the show up in a particular way so we could do that. But that's kind of how I would think about it, is like, all right, how do we get more maybe potentially out of the ideas that we're already doing?
Yeah. And like I think I mentioned earlier, like this is the first time in my career in working with content that we've just had too much. And previously it's just been like, how do we scrape together enough stuff from this 400 word blog post to like, put a distribution doc around it? And now it's like, okay, we have 6 blogs coming this week and we have 5 shows. And like you said, like I think it makes sense to figure out what is the main topic that is across a few of these different pieces of content, and how can we just like stack them up and say, this is the narrative, these are the things that support it, and then bam, great stuff.
Yep.
You told me I get value out of this call, and I got a ton of value, man.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's delivering on the promise, right? So before we wrap, I just want to make sure that if there's anything else, anything quick that you're like, hey, wish I would have asked that. I want to make sure you've got time to get anything else off that you were wanting help with.
No, I mean, the big things for me just from this call have been, obviously number one is putting a strategy around each channel. I've for some reason, it seems all of these things seem like elementary, but you get so in the weeds, you just forget about it. It's just like, oh, let's just throw this on LinkedIn, let's throw this on Twitter. So it's figuring out who you want to hit per channel and really zoning in there. And then obviously putting, like we just talked about, putting a strategy, putting a narrative, what cross-functionally content-wise can fit this narrative. And then that's like marry those two things and feels like a really good strategy, I think.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And what that does is it brings a level of consistency to your program that takes just a weight off your shoulders a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Like I know I've experienced that in my career, and even at times as I'm running my own business, of like, if there's too many things going on at any given point, it just feels like you're stuck in like the tires are just spinning and I'm not actually moving. I'm doing so much stuff, but I'm not moving forward. And so like having that plan of like, and again, not that it has to be a perfect plan. There is no perfect distribution plan. There is no perfect marketing plan, for Pete's sake, but like having a plan and then being like, we're going to be consistent in this, and then do it for a month, and then do it for another month, and then assess. And it's like just building up that slow momentum and building up that slow movement to where you'll look back in a quarter and be like, dang, like look at all this stuff we're putting out. And we're not having to like rack our brain every week to spin up new concepts and new content and new this and new that. And oh man, it actually is all tied together into the points of view that we want to get out and those thoughts, because you just spent a little bit of time planning. I was, deep in, as one does at the beginning of the year, like planning. And I saw this thing where it was like every 1 minute of planning saves you 10 minutes on the execution. And, I don't know if that's how accurate that is, but
timer on that.
but in my brain, I was like, you know what? They're probably right. You know what I mean? Like if you just spend the time to plan out what you want to do. And I would say for you, like, again, start small with a lot of this. Like, we're at the time of recording this, like middle of January, but like, what could February look like? Or like, what does the end of January into February look like as we're building this out? And then see what works, see what didn't, see where the pitfalls are, and then adjust for March, right? And it's not to say like, what's our 6-month distribution plan? What's our, Q2 distribution plan? It's like for the folks who actually have to get in and like do the work, it's about starting small and building that out. Like that's literally how I do it. Even when I'm going in-house and working on retainer, is like, all right, we're going to start by looking at what's currently working, what currently isn't. Okay, we're going to start and build that plan out. Now we're going to optimize it. And we might have to go all the way back and loop that back again as we get that rolling. So,
yeah, no, that's great. As you were saying that, something popped in my head of like, I think the trap we're falling into, and it's a good thing that we're having this discussion now because it's January and I don't want to be in June and just realizing this, but I think we've fallen into this trap that output equals impact, that like the more stuff we put out there, the better, when in fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, what's the impact you want to have? And then that is what equals the output. I just made that up, so I don't know if it makes sense at all, but that's how my brain works.
No, 1,000%. I literally have a note in my phone that I wrote down. I think I was at the gym or something, and it was like, it was less inputs or more inputs, less. I can't remember what it was, but it's like, it's that idea of like, you actually want to be able to not have to create a maximum amount of things that you have to. Like you want to have the maximum amount of impact that you can have with the least amount of things that you have to like spend your time with. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's with like you've taken the course and stuff like that, but you know, like the philosophy around like cornerstone content and core content. Having that one engine, like for me, it's this show. For you, it's probably like a mix of the SEO stuff and the TV stuff that you're doing. But like having that consistent engine that you can build and then pull all of your distribution off of that and then free up your time to build the bigger stuff that you can do and do like really big home runs, whether that's an event, a yearly event, whether that's a, you know, something, this experiment we're going to try. But you have to have that margin or you're just going to be completely burned out.
Yeah. And speaking of burnout, we're our next big endeavor, because we just keep stacking things, is like we've put together the state of data survey, and we're promoting it in newsletters. And like I've got to go back to the core content, the core cut, you know, layout, because man, that's just another content piece we're gonna have to layer in.
Man.
Yeah, awesome, man. I really appreciate it. This has been super helpful, and I can't wait to put these strategies in action. Back with
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. We'll be in touch for sure. And thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First. And thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode one way or another into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.